Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Driving Change, how Baltimore County's buy recycled policy can inspire your jurisdiction. A free webinar brought to you by the Maryland Recycling Network. I'm Peter Houstel, MRN's Executive Director, and will soon be joined by Richard Keller and Rebecca Culler, who will share and discuss Baltimore County's adoption of a buy recycled policy you may find a good fit for your jurisdiction. But before we go there, please be sure to mark your calendar for our upcoming events, including on Tuesday, March 17th, we'll be offering a tour of a Wider Circle, a unique social services program in Silver Spring that offers a reuse program to provide families in need with a complete set of furnishings for their homes, along with professional development and career advancement activities to help ensure they can continue to improve their lives and support their families. There will also be opportunities for those who would like to do so to volunteer that day. Then on April 8th, we're featuring a webinar on volunteers, a critical capacity building resource for recyclers. Join us to hear recycling coordinators from Maryland counties and municipalities share the strategies they employ to recruit and manage volunteers in their programs. And last but not least, I sure hope to see you Tuesday, June 2nd at Martin's West for the 2026 MRN Swana Mid-Atlantic Conference. You can see the program and register on our website now. Sponsorship and exhibit sales are also open. Be sure to check out all the details on the MRN website. And on the admin side of things, please feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat box. And we'll be posting a recording of the webinar on our website next week, which you're welcome to share with any and all who might be interested. So while most of these programs are free, they depend on the financial support of our members. So let me start by offering a big thank you to all of our current members. Those I'm sure you've heard me say many times before, we don't have any non-members. We just have paying members and non-paying members. So if you're one of those non-paying members, please head over to our website after this program and join today. You can become a paying member for as little as $25 a year. That's like 50 cents a week to help us help you drive the 3 Rs. Thank you. Speaking of support, I want to give a shout out to our sustaining and patron members, whose contributions, along with those of all our members, help us continue to support your efforts to drive reduction, reuse, and recycling. Okay, without further ado, it's time to turn the mic and screen over to our presenters. Richard, please take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to first of all thank everyone who is here for participating in this program.
I'm sorry.
I took a quick look at the registration list and I see lots of old friends. So for all of those old friends of mine and colleagues of mine, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the seminar. I want to begin this afternoon with some thanks. First to Peter and MRN for all of the work that they did in putting this particular program together. I want to thank Rebecca for all the work that she's done in preparing for this date. And we look forward to her comments and questions and things at the end of my presentation. I want to begin by emphasizing that the Buy Recycled and Environmentally Preferable program in the county is a team effort. And it begins with our green procurement work group. And that work group meets on a regular basis, usually once a week, and includes Greg Strella, the Chief Sustainability Officer for the county, Jim Stevenson, the Chief of Procurement, Brian Money, Jason Hartline, and Scott Mitcherling from procurement as well. And this group is the group that has been guiding the program since the very beginning. I want to thank the members of the Green Procurement Committee who are beginning to take actions to increase the purchases of recycled and environmentally preferable products. I know we have a number of members of the Green Procurement Committee that were registered for the conference. So if you're here, welcome to you as well. I want to take this opportunity to thank Vicki Nellis and Sam Linton from DGS who have done yeoman's work in terms of preparing some of the activities. It would be a lot more difficult for the county to be doing this program without the work that DGS has done over the years, and I thank Vicki and Sam for their work. And finally, so that I don't get myself in trouble later, I also want to thank Nick Rodericks, who is my boss, and also to thank my staff who does a lot of projects for me so that I can focus some of my attention on this particular project. So again, thank you to all the folks at the county level, at the state level, and elsewhere for the work that they've done. Let's begin this afternoon with a poll of the question is, why are you here? What is it that drives you to attend this session? What is it that you want to learn? Why is Buy Recycled important to you? So let's take that poll. And Peter, if you would take that poll now, that would be great. So please submit your answers to one of the 6 items that are listed in Why Buy Recycled.
Poll is launched. The horses are racing. At the moment, Create Markets is out in a substantial lead, followed by Managing Resources, Lower Greenhouse Gas Emissions, and Reducing Disposal. I'm sorry to say, conserving energy isn't getting any attention, so maybe somebody will give it some love. So please,
Peter, we'll give it another 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll move ahead.
you bet. So, Vicky, you wanted an all of the above, and this is a forced choice question. So we really want to see where the priorities are.
Good answer, Vicky.
I have to admit, I had the same inclination.
Yeah. So I think about 3/4 of everybody has responded. I'm not seeing any more responses coming in. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And as you can see, Create Markets was the front end. Reduced Disposal was second, followed by Managing Resources, Lowering Greenhouse Gas Emissions, and Creating Jobs and Economic Development. Richard, back to you.
Thank you, sir. So our next slide summarizes what we just did on the poll of some of the reasons that we buy recycled and environmentally preferable products and services. One of which is that state and local governments have a lot of purchasing power. They have the ability to influence the market. So that's one of the reasons that this is very important. The second is sustainable purchasing to be a good steward of the environment. And that's something that is certainly part of all of our DNA, is to be a good steward of what we have available. Providing markets is a critical element. One part of my job is to sell the commodities from our materials recovery facility in Cockeysville. And if we don't have good markets, then it's very difficult to sell the product at the highest rate. One of the things that they always said many years ago when we were talking about Buy Recycled was, if you're not buying recycled, you're not recycling. So providing markets is a critical element in all that. Even though it didn't get any love in our poll, conserving energy is certainly something that is important in all that, and the county has done a number of things on the energy conservation side. Lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and we know how critical that is with what's going on around the world. Next is reducing disposal to the county's only active landfill. We sometimes ask teachers when we do school presentations how many landfills they think the county has, and my colleague Kevin will tell you we get all sorts of answers from 0 to 10, but the actual answer is only 1. There is only 1 active landfill in Baltimore County. And finally, creating jobs and economic development. Kevin just sent me a note that he's heard 100 before, so I'm glad to know that we have 100 landfills. And last is creating jobs and economic development. And I saw from the registration list that we had some folks that are in the business of selling recycled products, so that's part of the whole situation. Next. So one of the things that we're going to do today is to merge 2 things, one of which is to take a look at what the county has done in terms of buying recycled and environmentally preferable products, but also to give you some tools and expertise that you can use to be able to either start or expand a program. So one of the things that we've done is developed what I call the 5 pillars of buying recycled and environmentally preferable products. And the first is to look at your current purchases to determine the current status and what opportunities exist. One of the things that we discovered in doing this project in the county was that the county was already buying and using a lot of recycled and environmentally preferable products. And a few slides from now, we'll give you some of those actual numbers. But you can't do anything unless you know where you are. I always used to talk about it in training programs and say, if I tell you to drive to Cleveland and you don't know where you're starting from, it's very hard to get to Cleveland if you don't know what the starting point is. So the first thing is look at your current purchases to determine the current status and opportunities. The second is to change your specifications to include recycled content and environmentally preferable requirements. Now, one of the things that we have done at the county level is to include that language, not just in contracts where we think we're going to have recycled and environmentally preferable, but in fact in all of our contracts. So every contract that the county is putting out now will have a requirement about recycled content environmentally preferable. One of the things that I've learned from the county experience is number 3, which is, I think, an interesting way to improve the Buy Recycled program, and that is to ensure that recycled and environmentally preferable products are at the top of vendor products lists. So we have taken, for example, our office supply contract, and the contractor is now putting the recycled and environmentally preferable products at the top of the list, which makes it much easier for somebody who's going to look for a recycled or environmentally preferable product to find it at the top of the list. So that's something we've really learned from this process, is to make that change. Fourth is to document the type and dollar volume of recycled and EP products. And again, we'll get into some of the actual numbers from the county. And finally is to train employees and vendors. We're going to be doing another training program for county employees next month during purchasing month. We're looking at training for new employees, and we're looking at training for vendors for recycled products. Next, Peter. The list here of recycled products is certainly by no means comprehensive, but it just gives you an idea of some of the things that are out there. Trash and recycling containers and bags, remanufactured items, electronics, vehicles, paper products and office supplies, which is a large one, construction, both building construction and general construction, janitorial services, and paint. And again, there's probably another 10 or 20 at least that we could do in terms of the variety of recycled products. So let's take a look at the executive order that was signed last April. It is Executive Order 2025-01. It requires county agencies to use specifications developed by the Maryland Department of General Services and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to require recycled content where practical for contract and service agreements, and to develop specifications for recycled and environmentally preferable products. So it's basically a way to say, let's take a look at everything that we're doing and how can we buy green in what we're doing. So next slide, Peter. So I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about what environmentally preferable products are. I think most of us are familiar with recycled products, that they're products that contain recycled material, most notably post-consumer material. But we also talk about environmentally preferable products. And so environmentally preferable products are those with a lower effect on human health and the environment. So it has to do with things like packaging. Is the product more durable? Is it reusable? Is it energy efficient? Is it less toxic? So quieter, believe it or not, is another area where we can look at an environmentally preferable product. And so part of the executive order is that purchasing will develop new specifications for environmentally preferable products and services. An agency shall buy such products unless the product does not perform, is not available at a reasonable price in a reasonable period of time. So it basically says take a look at what you're doing and find out where you can use environmentally preferable products. So the county has already changed language in all of our specifications that says that the county favors recycled and environmentally preferable products. And this has been included in all of our contracts through the purchasing department. So anytime that you find a product, and I actually looked at a couple from OIT earlier today, there is specific language that says the county favors recycled and environmentally preferable products. One of the things that we're going to be looking at down the road is vendor training and shows to advertise the policy. And I'll mention that DGS has done a number of vendor training and shows over the years, and I went to one, I think, last year. It's a good way for people to get buyers and vendors together to look at what's there. One of the things that we require in the executive order is the buyer shall verify the product or service is needed for county operations and is not in sufficient quantities in inventory. One of the things that we often find when we're doing buy recycled or we're doing environmentally preferable is that sometimes we buy something that's already sitting on the shelf. So it's important for us to do that in a way that we know that the product is actually needed. Again, we're going to look at annual training. Again, we're going to be doing something for purchasing month in March. And finally, we're looking at training for new employees. And I've talked to the folks in the county that do the training for new employees, and that's something that we're going to look at so that somebody who's coming into the system new can understand what the policy is. One of the things that what the executive order required was a green purchasing committee. It is led by the chief of purchasing. It includes buyers and representatives from various departments designated by the county administrative officer in consultation with purchasing and environmental protection and sustainability. And what we've tried to do with the Green Purchasing Committee is to get a variety of different agencies to participate in the program. So we've got representatives, for example, from Department of Public Works and Transportation, which is my agency, from Office of Information and Technology, from purchasing and other agencies. And the idea is we're going to start looking at the specifications and saying, does this make sense? Do we have the right language here? And is this something that we can then put out in the marketplace and have vendors respond to it? The committee is scheduled to meet at least quarterly. We've been meeting more often than that. And again, the idea is to review specifications and consider what are the improvements that we can make in terms of what we're buying with recycled content and environmentally preferable. Some other practices: managing documents electronically. A lot of the stuff that we do can be done electronically without generating paper. But if you are printing, make sure that the printing is double-sided on recycled paper, including the double-sided default on all county computers. And if you have vendor documents, again, have those vendor documents managed electronically. But again, if they're printed, have them double-sided on recycled and recyclable paper so that you've got ways that you can recycle what's left. One of the things that was required in the executive order was reporting. And the executive order requires a report each fiscal year by September 30th. And just for everybody's benefit, the county, like most of us, operates on a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. And one of the things that we did, or one of the things the executive order actually required, was that we go back and look at fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 and say, what are we already doing? What's already happening? And so in fiscal year 2024, the county, believe it or not, spent more than $26.4 million on recycled and environmentally preferable products, and also generated more than $9.2 million in savings and revenue. Because not all the stuff that the county does costs the county money. So, for example, we've got approximately $6 million a year that goes out through our materials recovery facility in Cockeysville, and that's revenue to the county. Other things that come up in terms of revenue could include things like materials that we use at the landfill. We might use compost and dirt at the landfill. So there's other kinds of things that aren't necessarily things that the county spends money on. We've got two companies that do electronic recycling for us. And again, they pay the county for that electronics recycling. Scrap metal, soil and rubble, compost, electronics. So there's lots of areas where the county is generating savings and revenue. In fiscal year 25, the green purchases exceeded $16.2 million, and again, more than $8 million in savings and revenue. One of the things that I've been mentioning in our meetings recently is how encouraged I am about the way that the program is going. If you had come to me in the summer of last year and told me that the county was already buying, 16 to $26 million in recycled products, recycled and environmentally preferable, and generating another 8 to 9 million in savings and revenue, I would have been very surprised. And so what this tells us is that the county already has a strong base for the program, because most of these actions took place prior to the signing of the executive order. The executive order wasn't signed until April of last year. So again, what this tells us is what's already happening, but it also tells us what are some of the new opportunities that we can take a look at. The next thing that the county is working on is that we'll be sending a letter to vendors asking them to provide information on purchases of recycled and environmentally preferable products. And here I want to take the opportunity again to thank Maryland DGS for the work that they've done in reporting. I know Sam Linton did a very nice training program a few weeks ago. And we're taking a look at the same 8 major categories that DGS is looking at: construction and maintenance, electronic and IT, food service, janitorial, lighting, office supplies, paints and coatings, and landscaping. So we will be sending a letter to our vendors, not only telling them what the executive order says, but also giving them a template of something that they can use for compiling and sending us their information. So again, this is another case where we've been able to take advantage of the work that DGS has done, and we'll be looking at that down the road. Next. So I want to take a look at a couple things on resources, and a number of the things that we have been talking about this morning will be in the chat. Maryland DGS has the green purchasing program for state agencies. Some of the specifications that are there are listed on that slide. So if you go to the next slide, Peter. The counties can use the DGS specs to develop a local specification, or can purchase from the vendors with DGS contracts. That's one of the advantages, is that you can buy off of the DGS contract through a cooperative purchasing agreement. And there is the link to DGS's website with all of that information. They've got specifications, they've got all sorts of guidance for that. And Vicki is adding a link to that. In addition, EPA has 61 guidelines for 61 products, and there's the listing of the eight categories that they have. This is for anybody that is looking at doing recycled products specifically. EPA has developed minimum content standards for all sorts of different products. And again, you have the link there to the EPA guidelines, specific EPA guideline information. So I want to kind of conclude this morning with a discussion of what the process is. What is it that, if you're starting from scratch, what should you be doing to buy more recycled and environmentally preferable products? The first is the product needed for operations? Is it really something that we need to have? Second, to ensure that the spec states that the county favors recycled and environmentally preferable products. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, any place I've used the word county, that could be state or even private, if you will. Review the specs from DGS and EPA to determine if there's a template for a new spec. Determine if there is or should be a minimum recycled content standard for the product. Require vendors to certify recycled and environmentally preferable standards. Require the vendor to provide information on dollar volumes of recycled and environmentally preferable purchases. Use eco labels where appropriate, and I believe Rebecca's going to put some information on the chat on eco labels, which is organizations that verify environmentally preferable features. And last but certainly not least, consider cooperative purchasing, because you can buy off of state contracts, you can buy off of multi-county contracts. There are a number of organizations where purchasing agencies work together on a cooperative purchasing basis. So there's lots of ways that you can do that. On specifications, first, use existing standards where available. I always tell people, please don't go reinventing the wheel, and especially please do not go reinventing the flat tire. Include buy recycled and environmentally preferable language in all the specs. Specify the highest practicable minimum level of recycled content. And we do not have time in this particular webinar, but if somebody wants to get into a discussion of how you set a minimum content standard, if you don't have a standard to go on, we can have that conversation. Use third-party certification or eco labels where it's appropriate. Require certification for the recycled content. Last but certainly not least is record keeping and evaluation. It's not enough to just simply do something and not tell anybody what you're doing. And there's lots of good reasons for that. The first is that if you keep good records, it helps supervisors, it helps customers, it helps employees, and it especially helps the public. So that gives you baseline data and successes. I don't think a lot of the general public is aware of the connection between buying recycled and recycling. I don't think that they're aware of the connection between environmentally preferable products and sustainability. So make sure that you're keeping good records so that you know what's going on. Document what you purchased, the quantities, recycled content, dollar volume, and experience in using the product. Again, this gives you not only a database of what you have available, but it also allows you to take a look and say, okay, where's the next frontier in terms of what we're doing? what is it that we haven't done so far? So maybe it's you've been looking at products, but you haven't really done a lot in terms of construction, or maybe you want to do more in terms of paints and coatings. It just depends on what you're looking at. But if you know what you're already buying and you know what's working, then you can take a look and say, what's next? And finally, I often say that record keeping and evaluation is the GPS of the program. Again, it's hard to know how to go to the next level when you don't know where you're going, you don't know where you've been, and you don't know what's going on. I want to conclude this morning or this afternoon by saying that this is an area that I have that brings me a lot of joy. It's something I'm very passionate about for those of you who know me. I am more than happy to talk to people and meet with people individually or in small groups, whatever is appropriate. And so the last slide is my contact person, my contact information. And so if anybody is interested in doing some follow-up, please get a hold of me. I'm more than happy to meet and talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about in terms of expanding your program. So with that, Peter, I believe I'm turning it over to Rebecca. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Rebecca, what questions do you think we need to get our heads around today?
So, always my biggest question when it comes to green purchasing and trying to influence, um, powers that be that are larger than me, so to speak. How do we work towards convincing folks that this is more than just a paper that says, oh, yeah, the county totally does this, or oh, yeah, our agency totally does this? I've had experience where, sure, we have a mandate for that already. We don't need to work on that. We already have a mandate, and everybody knows that does not necessarily mean that it's actually happening.
So there's a couple of answers to your question, Rebecca. Number one is this is a challenging process. It can take a long time, and it requires some persistence by those who are promoting the program. I think one of the ways that you convince leaders of what's going on is to go back and do um, the 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 to convince them of what's going on is to simply begin by saying, look, there's already things we're already doing. We're already buying recycled paper. We're already buying recycled cardboard boxes for our activities. So there's lots of things that we can do. In terms of the word mandate, that's really a great question because one of the things that I've experienced, and I've spent a lot of years looking at this particular subject, and there's a lot of laws on the books. There's a lot of policies on the books across the country at the federal level, the state level, the local level, whatever it may be. But the question is, does it really mean that we're buying more recycled and environmentally preferable products? And so my experience is that there's lots of laws and things on the books, but we've got to get to the actual day-to-day activity of actually buying and using the products. So it's a step between policy and mandates to actual activities. So, we need to be doers in terms of recycled products and environmentally
Yeah.
preferable.
Yeah. And I loved what you said during during your presentation, basically saying, training kind of happens at all levels. So not only are you talking about, in the answer to my question, kind of talking about your leadership, but you're also talking about working with vendors. You're also talking about making sure that everybody who's involved in the process from, product identification all the way through to procurement has kind of a way to approach this in a way that makes sense. And I'm actually going to drop one more document into our chat that is just a green purchasing cheat sheet. I know this is a lot of the stuff that Richard and I discussed, in developing this program for you guys. So I'm going to pass that along to you right now. And let me get to some of these other questions. Kara is asking, is there a logic behind choosing recycled content products instead of recyclable products? And would you consider recyclable products to be part of environmentally preferable?
Repeat the first half of the question again, Rebecca.
Sure. Is there logic behind choosing recycled content products instead of recyclable products? And would you consider recyclable to be part of EP, environmentally preferable?
So the short answer is that recycled is much more important than recyclable. Now, having said that, recyclable is certainly something that is an environmentally preferable feature, and I don't have any problem in counting that as something that's environmentally preferable. But I think we saw in the poll that people are looking for ways to help the markets.
Right.
And we simply, I can tell you right now, I had a conversation with Chaz Miller just the other day, for those of you who know Chaz, and we were talking about where the market is for PET, and it's pretty awful. And so recycled to me is much more important than recyclable, simply because that it's got it's something that allows us to do things with the markets.
Yeah, I think I would agree that definitely there's value in both, but I think in driving the market, buying recycled means, and I think you made that point at the beginning, if you aren't buying recycled, then you aren't actually recycling. As much as you put into the system, you have to take out of the system as well. Is that
Well,
kind of on
again,
point?
Rebecca, the poll said it all.
Yeah,
I mean, to me,
yeah,
when 42% of the people identified markets as the number one reason that they're buying recycled, that answers the question.
yeah, yeah, I agree. We've got a couple other great questions. Victoria, she's asking, when you did the what we're already doing part of getting this up and running, were there any surprising things that the county was already doing?
The surprising thing, frankly, was the volume. I don't think
Mm,
there was any single thing that the county was doing with the numbers. But again, if you had told me that it was, 26 million one year and 16 million the next, that was what was really surprising to me. And I think that's again, that's why I'm so encouraged by what we're doing.
yeah. I know in my experience too, when I have looked into this in my past, past roles, the number of things that we already had on hand that we were able to reuse. Somebody in one department was getting rid of it. We didn't throw it away. We took it, we used it for something else, making a kind of a trader platform, like almost like a buy nothing group within the agency, right? So I know that in addition to your volume answer, I think my answer would be, people's willingness to trade, right?
I remember one story, and this was a number of years ago, probably a decade or more ago, where we had somebody that was buying paint, and they were buying it in large, I don't know whether whatever size barrels that they were talking about, and they had used up all the paint in the barrels. And at the same time, that same county had a um, parks program, and they were able to take the barrels, and I'm assuming they just put plastic bags inside of them so they didn't get the paint all over them. But they basically used the paint barrels to make to use them for recycle. I hope it was recycling, but at least it was a trash can, so they were able to reuse them. So it was kind of a what we refer to in the business as a materials exchange.
Yeah.
They were basically taking one material and finding a new use or a new home for it.
Yeah.
I remember a number of years ago, somebody taught me, and over the years, you pick up slogans and things. And one of the slogans I remember from a number of years ago was use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And I think that's a good way to look at things.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question here from Nicole, from UMBC. How does the county enforce participation and compliance with the EO with purchasers when they're likely decentralized across departments? So she's saying similar to a university campus. So I'm guessing kind of how do you, and certainly feel free to clarify, Nicole, if I get this wrong, but how do you enforce participation and compliance with purchasers who are across a broad spectrum of parts of the agency?
So first of all, thank you for the question from my alma mater. I appreciate that. We're really kind of in the beginning stages, frankly, of what we're doing in terms of enforcement. Um, Basically, I think the thing that we've been able to get to have some of these things happen has been our Green Procurement Committee, where we have representatives from the various departments who are taking the leadership role in looking at specifications and trying to change them and making those kinds of changes. Frankly, I think part of the getting down to the individual buyer or user, I think is something that's going to happen over time as we do more training. Um, and again, that's why I think this training that we're going to do in March is going to be so important, is that we're going to be able to get down to the individual buyer. But most of what we've done at this point, at least, has been through the various agencies and the leadership within those various agencies. So that's really what has made the difference at this point. But so I think some of the enforcement that you're talking about is going to come later down the road.
That definitely will take time, right? Like the getting a good program up and running definitely takes time. So, let's see here. We've got Andrea Crooms, Maryland lead for Circular Action Alliance. And she's talking about being responsible for the producer responsibility plan for the packaging EPR stuff going on now. She says, I'm curious what thoughts you might have about how this topic fits into the EPR program and what support counties or municipalities might need from the program to move in this direction.
I'm going to admit here that I'm kind of on the periphery as far as EPR is concerned. I know we've looked at some of the things that are going on, and I know that's something that we're taking a look at. I don't really at this point have any specific answer to the question. It's certainly something I'm happy to talk about down the road, but while I've looked at some of the EPR stuff, it's not something that's been high on my priority list.
It's an excellent question too. I think kind of working through the topics of legislation and of what is going to be going down with EPR and all of that. I think it's a super great conversation to have, and I think once we get a little bit into it, we'll probably be a little more able to answer that. Definitely, I recommend or request, Andrea, please do feel free to reach out too, because I think that's a much longer conversation that we could have. Couple more questions.
Rebecca, real quick,
Yeah.
I would just add that EPR, and again, I don't have a whole lot of experience in it. It's very complex. It takes time. It's very time consuming. I think we don't really know at this point what its effect is going to be on the overall recycling system. So, again, I'm happy to talk to people about that in more detail, but again, it's just not something that's been at the top of my priority list.
Makes sense. All right, we've got two more. It looks like Brian is asking, the paint and coating contracts are sometimes too broad for a paint recycler to bid. I have to admit, Richard, I don't know a lot about paint, but let's get to the question. Can you make them more specific to paint? Repaint USA, the vendor of recycled paint. You, I'm not sure. I certainly don't have an answer for this one.
I don't have an answer either. It's relatively new,
Okay.
and considering the fact that and we haven't really dealt with it in any of our committees, I would strongly suggest that if people have an interest in paint, that you take a look at the DGS website. I know they've done not much more on paint than I have.
Yes, and I did notice when I was putting together those documents that I've plunked into the chat, I did notice that there are, specifications on there. I once again definitely invite you to reach out and have a chat. I would love to learn more about that and love to help you find an answer to that question.
And if I can make a shameless bid pitch for the conference, we have a couple of sessions, one dealing with the EPR, where Andrea, maybe you'll get some answers from people who know where your question could be answered. And Brian Paint Care will be doing a presentation at the conference as well, and to address perhaps that issue of paintings versus coatings and how they could be addressed in a buy recycled contract.
And DGS just sent me a note that they're kind of in the early stages on paint as well. So
Okay. All right. And then Peter, I might be wrong, but I believe we did a paint care webinar not that long ago.
Yeah, we did. And that was sort of at the beginning of the paint care process. So I think
Gotcha.
at this point, we'll be 6 months into actually implementation. So there may be some more details and some more experience, quite frankly, to talk about how things are flowing.
Fantastic. An excellent, a very cool topic. I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. Um, Here's another question from Allison. She says, in implementing an EPP program, I was frequently asked about the accountability of vendors receiving diverted materials, and that's tough to see through. Has this changed for the better? Do your downstream vendors share their material flow in support of their stats?
you're going to have to repeat that question. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, sure. So I think, and certainly, let me know, Allison, if I'm wrong, but I believe the question is about, downstream vendors and what they do with their diverted material. So
Uh,
if you're certifying them, as a green vendor in whatever capacity, do you have kind of a better view of what they're doing with that stuff?
In other words, beyond their stats, because we can always put numbers down on paper, but many people wanted to go to the site to see what they were actually doing with what they received from us and wanted to know where it ended up, whether or not it became a new product or what did they do with it that might transfer or create a risk that we weren't aware of.
I think the business maxim is trust but inspect.
Yeah,
and,
definitely the transparency question there.
and Allison, I think in some way, I think you've answered your own question, which is that if that is something that you have a concern about, I would go to the vendor and either A, ask them to give you the information that you need in writing, or B, go and visit them and say, okay, so what are you actually doing with this once you actually get the material?
So, like Peter was saying, trust but inspect, learn what they're doing. I do know in my time, Allison, sometimes sometimes you just got to go with what they say they're doing, and other times you have that ability. I think a lot of times it comes down to trust and partnership. The more, so I came from a much smaller jurisdiction, and so I think when we were reaching out to our vendors and we were working very closely with them, it became kind of a point of pride that we had a long-term trusting relationship with folks that were local, and we could really work with them. That does get harder, as it gets bigger, as your agency spends more, as those companies take up more capital. Certainly having those conversations and having that relationship over time really does help.
Okay, well, this has been wonderful. Thanks again, Richard and Rebecca, for an excellent presentation. How about a big round of applause for our presenters? And before we go, once again, please mark your calendars for our conference on June 2nd. And a little reminder to all the non-paying members, please help us promote and implement the 3 Rs by joining today. Thanks to all for attending. Hope to see you in person at our conference on June 2nd. Stay well.